What if I told you there's an island smaller than West Virginia that's hiding birds found nowhere else on Earth? Not in the Amazon, not in the Himalayas, not even in your wildest birding dreams, just Sri Lanka. This tropical wonderland is home to some of the weirdest, rarest, and most mysterious bird species you've probably never heard of. We're talking jungle magpies with electric blue feathers, owls that were unknown to science until 2001, and tiny parrots that sleep upside down like feathered bats. Seriously, Sri Lanka is avian Hogwarts. But here's the big question. If a bird exists on only one island in the world, what happens when that island changes? Stick around, because today we're counting down 15 of the most spectacular and rare bird species that live only in Sri Lanka's forests, swamps, and mountain mist. Some are bright, some are shy, and one of them might just be the loudest thing you'll never see. Let's dive in. Let's start strong with a bird that looks like it flew straight out of a Pixar movie. Meet the Sri Lanka blue magpie. Bright cobalt blue body, brick red wings, neon orange beak, and eyes so intense it looks like it's judging your life choices. This isn't just one of the most colorful birds in Sri Lanka, it's also one of the smartest. Blue magpies belong to the crow family, which means they're basically feathered geniuses with better fashion sense. They live deep inside Sri Lanka's wet zone rainforests, especially places like Scimitar, which, by the way, feels more like Jurassic Park than a real forest. These birds move in tight family groups, bouncing between trees like a squad of jungle gymnasts. They hunt insects, small reptiles, and sometimes even other birds' chicks. Yeah, they've got a bit of a dark side. Fun fact, Sri Lanka blue magpies are obsessed with following monkeys. Why? Because monkeys stir up bugs as they move, and then the magpies swoop in to grab the snacks. That's right, jungle freeloaders with style. But here's the twist. Even though they're brightly colored and clever, they're really hard to spot. Why? Because they stick to the deepest parts of the rainforest, where light barely filters through and everything is tangled in vines. They avoid disturbed areas and won't come near farms or roads, which makes them highly vulnerable to deforestation. As Sri Lanka's forests shrink, so does their world. And even though they're listed as vulnerable, some estimates say their population could collapse in just a few decades without strong protection. And here's something wild. Most Sri Lankans have never seen one in real life. Let that sink in. A national treasure that's practically invisible. So here's your question. Can a bird be this beautiful, this smart, and still disappear quietly? Tell us what you think in the comments. Up next, we head into the shadows to meet a bird that science didn't even know existed until 2001. Now for a bird with zero bright colors, zero fame, and zero chill. Say hello to the Serendip Scops owl, a bird so elusive, it literally dodged science for centuries. This tiny earth-toned owl lives in the lowland rainforests of southern Sri Lanka, and it was completely unknown to the world until 2001. Yeah, 2001. That's the same year the first iPod came out. Let that sink in. So how do you miss a species of owl for that long? Easy. It's silent, nocturnal, forest-dwelling, and tiny enough to sit in your palm. Plus, its camouflage is next level. Perched on a low branch, it looks like just another chunk of bark. Fun fact, the Serendip Scops owl doesn't have ear tufts, unlike most of its cousins. That's one reason it was misidentified for so long. It's like the owl that skipped dress code and just snuck into the background. But here's the real twist. When Sri Lankan ornithologist Deepal Warakagoda heard a strange, unfamiliar whop, whop call in the rainforest, he didn't ignore it. He followed it. And after months of searching, he found the bird no one else even knew to look for. That makes the Serendip Scops owl the first new bird species discovered in Sri Lanka in over 100 years. And its name? Serendib is the old Arabic name for Sri Lanka. So yes, this bird is named after the island itself. But of course, there's a catch. It's estimated that there are fewer than 250 individuals left. Why? Because its rainforest home is vanishing faster than you can say deforestation, and once it's gone, there's no second chance to rediscover it. So here's your question. How many other creatures are hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone to listen? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Next up, we meet a bird that looks familiar, but with a twist. It's flashy, it's fierce, and it might just be the original chicken. You've seen chickens, you've eaten chickens, but have you ever seen a chicken that looks like it just walked off the red carpet? Meet the Sri Lanka jungle fowl, aka the national bird of Sri Lanka, and the original inspiration behind the modern-day chicken. This isn't your average barnyard clucker. Males have glowing orange plumage, iridescent blue-black tails, and a bright red comb that looks like it was sculpted from hot wax. Also, that comb, it has a yellow spot in the center, like someone stuck a highlighter on its forehead. They strut through the undergrowth with confidence, scratching, pecking, and letting out that classic cook, cook, cook cow, like a rooster that just learned it has an audience. Fun fact, despite its familiar look, the Sri Lanka jungle fowl is not just a wild version of a domestic chicken. It's a completely separate species, evolved in isolation on the island for millions of years. In fact, DNA studies suggest this bird might have contributed to early chicken domestication, but it's still wild at heart. Unlike backyard chickens, these birds are lightning fast, nervous around humans, and incredibly difficult to photograph in dense forest. And here's the twist. Even though it's the national bird, it's not protected everywhere. As forests are cleared for agriculture and development, these ground nesting birds lose both habitat and food sources. And in some areas, they're still illegally hunted for meat, because apparently national pride comes with a side of curry. Despite this, the species isn't critically endangered yet. But like many of Sri Lanka's forest dwellers, it's on a slow, quiet slide toward trouble. So here's your question. How do you protect something people think they already know, but don't actually understand? Let us know in the comments. Next up, we head deeper into the forest to meet a shy, ground-dwelling bird with a laugh like a ghost and spurs that make it sound like a medieval knight. You ever walk through the forest, hear something weird behind a bush, and immediately think, nope, that's probably the Sri Lanka spur fowl. This bird sounds like a ghost with a sore throat, laughing its head off at your expense. Its call? A wild, echoing series of cackles and raspy screams, like a haunted chicken laughing at its own joke. But don't worry, it's not here to possess you. It's just one of the most secretive and elusive birds in the country. The Sri Lanka spur fowl is a chunky, ground-dwelling bird with dark brown plumage, white streaks, and a bright red face and legs. It looks like someone tried to redesign a pheasant, using only forest camouflage and war paint. Fun fact, this bird has 2 sharp spurs on each leg, hence the name. That's 4 total. Double the kick, double the drama, but you'll almost never see it. Even experienced birders can spend days in the rainforest hearing its spooky call echo through the trees and never catch a glimpse. It prefers dense, undisturbed forest and slips through undergrowth like a ninja in feathers. It rarely flies, just runs. Fast. Here's the twist. Even though it's widespread in theory, its numbers are dropping due to habitat destruction and trapping. Some locals still hunt it for meat, despite its endemic status and cultural value. And because it's not bright or famous, it gets overshadowed by flashier species. But ask any Sri Lankan birder what bird they want to see, and this one's almost always on the list. So here's your question. If a bird only shows itself once in a blue moon, but still haunts the forest with its voice, is hearing it enough? Tell us your take in the comments. Next, we take flight into the misty highlands to meet a pigeon. That doesn't act like a pigeon at all. All right, I know what you're thinking. A pigeon? Really? But hear me out. This isn't your average park-dwelling, crumb-stealing city bird. This is the Sri Lanka wood pigeon, a forest-dwelling loner that lives above the clouds in the cool, misty highlands of the island. It's big, quiet, and almost royal in appearance, with soft gray feathers, a metallic green collar, and eyes that glow deep crimson. This bird looks like it meditates every morning before sunrise. It lives in cloud forests, often over 1,500 meters above sea level, in places like Horton Plains and Knuckles Range. And unlike its city cousins, it actually knows how to keep a low profile. Fun fact, while most pigeons gather in flocks, the Sri Lanka wood pigeon is a solitary specialist. You'll usually see just one, perched silently on a mossy branch, acting like it's contemplating the meaning of life. Its call is haunting too, a slow, mournful hoo, hoo, that echoes softly through the mist. Peaceful, but kinda gives you goosebumps. But here's the twist. This bird has been slowly disappearing for years. It's only found in Sri Lanka and only in a handful of shrinking forests. As climate change pushes temperatures higher and agriculture creeps up the mountain slopes, its cool, cloud-kissed world gets smaller. It's currently listed as vulnerable, and in many places, even local residents don't know it exists. Which raises the big question, if something is quiet and beautiful and disappears silently, who's left to notice? Let us know what you think in the comments. Up next, we stay high in the mountains and meet a tiny, energetic bird with bright yellow ears and a surprising amount of attitude. If birds had earbuds, this one's already wearing them. Meet the yellow-eared bulbul, a chirpy little resident of Sri Lanka's Central Highlands, and one of the island's most active, acrobatic, and underrated endemics. This bird is fast, feisty, and full of character. It sports a sharp crest, bright yellow cheeks, hence the name, olive green back, and a chest that fades into soft gray. Like a bird that dressed itself in spring colors with a punk haircut. You'll find them bouncing through trees in cool cloud forests, especially around Horton Plains, Nuwara and Hakala. They love fruit, insects, nectar, and basically anything small and edible that doesn't run away fast enough. Fun fact, these guys are super vocal, and not just to sing. They chirp, whistle, and chatter constantly to keep track of each other, like a walkie-talkie network in the trees. No cell service needed. They're one of the few Sri Lankan endemics that can adapt to slightly disturbed habitats, which means you might see them near gardens, forest edges, or tea plantations, if you're lucky, but don't get too comfortable. Here's the twist. Even though they're more common than some of the others on this list, the yellow-eared bulbul is still completely restricted to high elevations, and those habitats are shrinking fast. Warming temperatures, plantation expansion, and invasive species are slowly pushing them up the slopes. And once you reach the top, there's nowhere else to go. It's a quiet squeeze. And when the weather shifts just a few degrees, birds like this can lose entire nesting zones overnight. So here's your question. If a bird seems cheerful and adaptable, does that mean it's safe? Or are we just not listening closely enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Next, we head toward the rivers and waterfalls, where a bird with deep blue feathers and a voice like a flute hides in the mist, waiting to surprise even the most patient birders. You ever try to find something that doesn't want to be found? Meet the Sri Lanka whistling thrush, a bird so shy, so rare, and so stealthy, locals call it the ghost of the forest. And yeah, it earns the title. This elusive little thrush lives in the wet, misty highlands of Sri Lanka, hiding near mountain streams, waterfalls, and dense undergrowth, places where sunlight barely sneaks through the leaves. It's about the size of a robin, but the male is cloaked in deep, velvety blue with a flash of electric blue on the shoulders. Females? Much duller, because nature loves a fashion imbalance, but good luck seeing either. Fun fact, despite being endemic to Sri Lanka and known to science for over a century, the whistling thrush is almost never seen in the wild. Even seasoned birders have been known to wait days just to hear one, let alone catch a glimpse. Its song, though? Pure magic. A clear, flute-like whistle that cuts through the fog and echoes down forest trails, like a message from a hidden world. Here's the twist. This bird is now critically endangered. Its entire known range is limited to a few protected forests, like Horton Plains and Peak Wilderness. And with habitat loss, invasive species, and climate change eating away at those strongholds, this ghost could vanish for good. In fact, for years, scientists thought it was extinct, until a few individuals were spotted again in recent decades. But the numbers still dangerously low. It's a bird so rare, it almost disappeared before we truly understood it. So here's your question. What do we do with species that ask for nothing but silence and space? Are those the hardest ones to save? Share your thoughts in the comments. Up next, we head back into social territory, where a group of gray and white chatterboxes stir up the forest with their non-stop drama and distinctive laugh. You know that one neighbor who always knows what's going on, whether you want them to or not. That's basically the ashy-headed laughing thrush. These birds travel in noisy gangs, chatting, squabbling, and gossiping their way through the undergrowth like feathery forest aunties. They're about the size of a blackbird, with soft gray heads, dark wings, and sharp white markings that make them look perpetually alert, like they're always mid-rumor. You'll find them in dense rainforest understory, mostly in Sri Lanka's wet zone, like Sinaraja and Kanalea. And they almost never travel alone. Fun fact, this species is so social that if one bird finds a juicy grub, the whole squad shows up. They're like the birds of Facebook. Everything is shared instantly and loudly. Their call, a rapid-fire series of chuckles, squeaks, and whistles that sound like someone retelling a scandalous story while laughing through it. But don't let the comedy fool you. Here's the twist. The ashy-headed laughing thrush is critically endangered, with a range that's tiny and shrinking fast. It only lives in a few scattered forest patches in southwestern Sri Lanka, and deforestation has turned those forests into isolated islands. That's bad news for a bird that needs room to roam and family to chatter with. When forest corridors disappear, these birds don't just lose food and shelter, they lose their entire way of life. Worse, they're understudied. Because they aren't flashy or mysterious like owls or eagles, they often get left out of the conversation, ironically for a bird that never stops talking. So here's your question. If a species lives loud but dies quietly, will anyone notice? Let us know in the comments. Coming up next, a bird with a sword-shaped beak, not for fighting, but for slicing through forest shadows like a jungle surgeon. Okay, imagine this. You're deep in a rainforest. It's damp, quiet, eerie. Then suddenly, a flicker of movement, a flash of white and chestnut, a shadow gliding low like a blade in the brush. That's the Sri Lanka scimitar babbler, part bird, part mystery, and part samurai. This elusive forest dweller is named for its long, curved beak, shaped like a scimitar, an old-school sword. It's not for fighting, though. It's for slicing through leaf litter and poking into bark crevices to pull out insects, spiders, and other creepy crawlies. Its colors, earthy brown body, bold white throat, black mask, and that signature curve. Low-key but sharp, like a bird dressed in stealth mode. Fun fact, despite being secretive, scimitar babblers are loud. They travel in pairs or family groups, constantly calling back and forth with rising, flute-like notes. It's like a rainforest version of walkie-talkie banter. But here's the twist. There are other scimitar babblers in Asia, but this species, totally endemic to Sri Lanka, and it only lives in a few pockets of undisturbed wet zone rainforest, which means as forests disappear, so does this curved beak specialist. It's listed as near threatened, but most people have never heard of it, let alone seen one. And honestly, how do you protect something that hides so well? If you're not specifically listening for its call, you could walk right past a dozen of them and never know it. So here's your question. Is a species still at risk? If almost no one knows it's there, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Coming up, we switch gears, leaving behind shadow birds and entering the world of forest carpenters with green feathers, red foreheads, and beaks built like chisels. You know how some birds sing? Well, this one prefers to carve its name into the tree. Meet the crimson-fronted barbet, Sri Lanka's very own jungle carpenter, armed with a neon green suit and a personal jackhammer for a face. It's about the size of a sparrow but way flashier, with bright green feathers, a chunky wood-carving beak, and a splash of crimson red right on its forehead, like it head-butted a tomato. You'll usually hear it before you see it, a hollow, repetitive tuck, 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 echoing through the forest canopy as it drums a nesting hole into a dead tree. Fun fact, barbets don't just drill for fun. They actually excavate their own nesting chambers, often returning to the same tree for generations. Birds with real estate plans. They eat fruit, mostly figs, and help spread seeds throughout the forest. So yeah, they're tiny green gardeners too. But here's the twist. Even though the crimson-fronted barbet is relatively common in forested zones, its population is still limited to Sri Lanka. Yup, this flashy little chisel beak doesn't live anywhere else, and it's super dependent on trees with soft wood for nesting. Cut down those trees, you don't just lose a tree, you lose future barbets. Plus, in more urban or cultivated areas, this species disappears fast. It needs real forests, not just a couple decorative palms and a roadside mango. So here's your question. When a bird literally helps build its world, shouldn't we be building something back? Let us know in the comments. Next up, we head into the treetops to find a bird barely bigger than your thumb, but with enough color to light up a whole canopy. Okay, picture a bird. Now shrink it. Smaller, smaller. Yup, that's the size of the Legge's flowerpecker, one of Sri Lanka's smallest birds, and possibly one of its most overlooked. It's only about 8 centimeters long. That's shorter than a credit card, and it weighs less than a sheet of paper. But don't let the size fool you. This tiny fluff ball is hyperactive, lightning fast, and plays a huge role in forest ecology. You'll find it flitting through the canopy of Sri Lanka's wet and dry zone forests, especially around Kitulgala and Sinaraja, feeding on tiny berries, nectar, and sometimes even insects. Fun fact, flowerpeckers are known as seed dispersal specialists. They gulp down fruit and poop out the seeds somewhere else, basically acting as adorable high-speed reforestation drones. The Legge's flowerpecker is named after William Vincent Legge, a 19th century naturalist who cataloged many of Sri Lanka's birds. It's endemic to the island and not found anywhere else on Earth. Its plumage, mostly olive green above, yellowish below, with a dash of crimson on the rump if you're lucky to catch it mid-flight. But good luck spotting one. They move fast, they stay high, and they barely sit still for more than half a second. Here's the twist. They're so tiny and agile that they often get overlooked in bird surveys, which means we know shockingly little about their current population health. They're not endangered right now, but their habitats are being nibbled away by farming, development, and invasive species. If the canopy goes, so do the flowerpeckers, and with them, a whole web of plant life that depends on their poop-powered deliveries. So here's your question. Can a bird this small really matter? Or are we just too big to notice the difference? Let us know below. Next up, we meet a bird with eyes like eyeliner, a face like a cartoon character, and a personality way louder than its body size. Some birds fly solo, others hang out in pairs. This one rolls deep, introducing the Sri Lanka white-eye, a chirpy little socialite with a built-in pair of white goggles around its eyes. And trust us, this bird is always watching. At first glance, it might look like your typical white-eye species, small, greenish-yellow, always moving, always calling. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't just a white-eye. It's Sri Lanka's own unique endemic species, found nowhere else in the world. And genetic studies show it's not even closely related to other white-eyes in nearby regions. Yup, turns out this little guy has been doing its own thing for millions of years. Fun fact, Sri Lanka white-eyes are super sociable. They move in flocks, sometimes dozens at a time, zipping through gardens, forests, and cloud-covered hills like a hyperactive bird ballet. You'll find them mostly in the montane forests and highlands, especially around places like Nuwara Eliya and Horton Plains. They're a familiar sight up there, but don't mistake common locally for safe overall. Here's the twist. Their entire world is limited to Sri Lanka's hill country. That means a few degrees of warming or a few too many tea plantations could push them into serious trouble fast. And because they look so similar to other white-eyes, people often overlook just how unique they are. Which is kind of sad, right? A bird that evolved for ages in splendid isolation, now just another face in the crowd. So here's your question. If something looks ordinary, but its story is extraordinary, shouldn't we be paying closer attention? Tell us in the comments. Next up, a secretive thrush with speckled wings, haunting calls, and a taste for leaf litter drama. Some birds scream for attention. Others just sing. The spot-winged thrush doesn't need neon feathers or flashy moves. It just needs a quiet forest, a soft morning mist, and a voice that could stop you in your tracks. Native only to Sri Lanka, this bird prefers the shadowy understory of dense forests, especially in the wet zone. It's about the size of a robin with a warm brown body, speckled chest, and subtle white spots on its wings, like it's wearing nature's version of a polka dot blazer. Fun fact, its song is one of the most beautiful and complex among Sri Lanka's birds. Long, whistled phrases that sound almost human, like a flute duet echoing from deep in the forest. Some say it's so melodic, it rivals even the famed nightingales. But good luck catching a performance. Spot-winged thrushes are not showy. They forage alone, hopping among leaf litter, quietly flipping leaves with surgical precision. And when they sense danger, they vanish instantly. Here's the twist. Even though they're not critically endangered, their range is narrow. As Sri Lanka's lowland and mid-elevation forests are logged, their world becomes smaller and quieter. They're sensitive to disturbance, so even ecotourism, when not done right, can drive them deeper into hiding. And in a digital world where only the loudest get heard, this bird might just get lost in the silence. So here's your question. Can beauty survive if it chooses not to shout? Let us know in the comments. Coming up next, we take to the skies with a bird that's all speed, grace, and precision. Sri Lanka's very own elusive swallow that refuses to migrate and doesn't care if you notice. Swallows usually bring to mind open skies, long migrations, and postcards from halfway across the world. But not this one. The Sri Lanka swallow is a homebody, a sleek, copper-bellied flyer that lives and dies right here on this island. No vacations, no passport, just 100% local loyalty. It's slightly chunkier than your average swallow, with deep blue upper parts, a bright cinnamon orange underside, and a long, elegantly forked tail that cuts through the air like a jet. You'll often spot them gliding over open clearings and highland fields, especially around Nuwara Eliya in the southern central hills. They swoop low to snap up insects in midair, aerial acrobats that make it look effortless. Fun fact, while many swallows migrate thousands of miles, the Sri Lanka swallow is non-migratory, a true island specialist. It's evolved to live with the rhythms of the local climate and food cycles, and it's the only swallow species endemic to Sri Lanka. That's a big deal. Most swallows are global citizens. This one, total island introvert. But here's the twist. Despite being relatively easy to spot if you know where to look, there's very little research on this species. We don't know exact population numbers. We don't know how climate change might affect their food supply. And we barely understand their breeding habits. They're literally flying under the radar. As habitats shift and insect populations drop in some areas, even adaptable birds like this might start to feel the heat. So here's your question. Can a species that seems common still be in danger simply because no one's paying attention? Drop your thoughts below. Next and last, we'll meet the brightest, tiniest parrot in Sri Lanka. It sleeps upside down, zips through jungle trees like a green blur, and proves that small birds can leave the biggest impressions. Bright green, cherry red face, half the size of your hand. And yes, this bird sleeps upside down. Meet the Sri Lanka hanging parrot, arguably the cutest outlaw in the rainforest. It's one of the smallest parrot species in the world, and it's 100% endemic to Sri Lanka. You'll find it darting between flowering trees in forest edges and highland gardens. A tiny green blur with a voice like a squeaky toy. But don't be fooled by the toy-like size. This parrot is fast, clever, and has one of the strangest sleeping habits in the bird world. Fun fact, at night it finds a high branch, tucks its head into its feathers, and hangs upside down like a little leafy bat. Seriously, parrot by day, fruit-eating danglebat by night. It feeds on nectar, fruits, and soft seeds, playing a vital role in pollination and seed dispersal. But it's also very sensitive to habitat fragmentation. Even though you might spot it near gardens and cultivated areas, it still needs connected forest patches to nest and forage safely. Here's the twist. Because it's small, cute, and colorful, illegal pet trade has become a real threat in some parts of the country. People trap them for their looks, not realizing how much they're pulling apart ecosystems, one parrot at a time. And despite being a symbol of charm, the hanging parrot remains wildly misunderstood, quietly hanging between survival and disappearance. So here's your final question. Can we really say we love something if we don't protect the world it lives in? Drop your answer in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you made it this far, first of all, you're awesome. Second, you've now met 15 bird species that live only in Sri Lanka. No duplicates, no second homes, one island, one shot at survival. If this kind of wildlife amazes you, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more rare species from the far corners of Earth. And hey, which of these birds would you travel to Sri Lanka just to see? Tell us in the comments below. Until next time, keep your eyes on the trees and your heart in the wild.